What if you could always be different from your competition and never, ever had to compete on price? What would the difference be for your profitability? Welcome to the Wealth Ability Show. Today, we have the absolute expert on this, Barry Labov, who wrote the book called The Power of Differentiation. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And we're going to have a nice conversation with this. Barry, so grateful that you're on our show today.
Hey, Tom, it's an absolute honor to be with you today. So I'm excited. Let's fire away and have a lot of fun.
Well, before we get started, give us a little bit of your background, because it's a fairly impressive resume.
Well, I know your audience includes a lot of entrepreneurs. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a somewhat reluctant entrepreneur. I didn't mean to do it, but it happened. But I've been running a business for over 40 years. I started out in music. I was a rock and roll musician. I had hair. I had it all going for me, and started a jingle company, then eventually migrated into running my own company, creating marketing, advertising, and training out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and working with companies all over the nation and even all over the world. And today we now work with Harley Davidson, Mercedes-Benz, Macallan Scotch, Stoli Vodka. So there's a lot of drinking and driving going on and all that. And a lot of other great companies, small and large, new and old. And we've just opened up our office in Dallas, Texas. So we now have two offices, one in Fort Wayne, Indiana, one in Dallas. And our new book called The Power of Differentiation has been released on Amazon. And it was the top new marketing book last week. So that's great. So a lot going on, and it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. So thank you. So, we've all I'm presuming most of us have read Blue Ocean Strategy and those books. And here you set yourself up for a really a unique product or service. You don't have competitors. You're brand new. And the folks from Blue Ocean say, well, you probably got 10 to 15 year run in that. And that's been my experience. It's about a 10 to 15 year run. And then all the sharks come in and all that water goes from blue to red. And, as I understand, your position is you don't have to go from blue to red, that you can actually the way I would put it is you can constantly stay blue. So let's start with the value of being in that unique spot, as opposed to, being basically the P&G, right? Where you're competing with the other big brands.
Well, I think what's important, whether you're a one-person company or whether you have 10,000 employees, it doesn't really matter. You have to look at what makes you unique. And Tom, what I want to share today is that let's not confuse the idea of what makes you superior. It's not superiority, it's distinctiveness, it's uniqueness. So you have to discover that. And that's another important word we'll share today very often, and that is discover. You don't try to create what makes you unique, because it's really hard to sustain that. If you're trying to be like that company and this company and that one and this one, and then you try to get commoditized and lower your price and round out the rough edges and get cheaper and cheaper, it's a rough world. So what we recommend is discover, and it's not easy, but it can be done. What is unique? What's distinctive about what you do? And we'll talk about some different things. It could be a product you offer. It could be your experience, what it's like to work with you. It could be a technology. Who knows? I don't know what it is for every company. But once you do that, you have to be able to name it. Because after all, many of us have children, right? Well, you don't have child 1, child 2, child 3, and child 4. They all have names. So let's name our differentiation. And most of us don't have 150 children. So let's name the 1, 2, 3, or 4 differentiators we have. And let's explain what those really are all about. And then the final step is probably the most exciting for any of us out there who have employees. And that is launch your differentiation to the world. But first, before you go outside your four walls, share it and celebrate it with the most important people, your employees, the people who represent you, the people who sell you, who service you, the people who love you. Share it with them, celebrate it. And you know why? Because they need significance. They need to feel what they're doing means something. Or otherwise, Tom, why are they doing anything for you? Why work for you? Why work for me? It's all the same. We don't do anything different. So we've got to give them that. And that's what leaders do. That's our whole approach.
I love it. So let's kind of go down this path. All right. So let's say that you've come up with what makes you different, right? And I mean, I'll give you an example. I'll give you us. Okay. We'll take Wealthability. About 15, 20 years ago, we came up with this idea of doing a wealth and tax strategy. And, and we were the only ones who'd ever done it. And, so we had, it was just a matter of getting the word out, right? Because nobody had ever done it before. And they kept coming until all of a sudden the competitors said, hey, we like that name. Well, the challenge with that name, because I'm keyed in on the naming, because the challenge with the name is that's not a name you trademark. That's too descriptive of a name. So you have to have, my belief is you have to have a name for what it is that is not a descriptive name. Right. And so it's got to be, you've got to be able to trademark it so that your competitors can say, okay, well, we do something like that. It's kind of like, I mean, the one I use is like P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps, right? Everybody has a lettuce wrap now. Well, P.F. Chang's, they came up with it and it was a big hit for them and they were the only ones doing it until everybody else did it. And now it's just not a differentiator for them, except for those that are already, used to P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps. And so kind of walk us through, if you will.
Sure.
All right. So let's start with that naming, because I actually think that's a critical point right off the bat.
Well, what we want to do is this. We've got to be very careful that we go deeper than the name. And I'm sure you do with your business. But a lot of times people come up with a name or something cute and catchy, but it really means very little. So now you've come up with this cliche thing and it's like, yeah, who cares? So if you dig into Wealthability, as an example, Tom, you would say, okay, we're the only people that offer Wealthability. We have a 4-step process. Nobody in the world does one of those steps. Everybody does a couple of those steps. So if you go through these different steps, this is what the result is. And if that unique step in Wealthability, our 3rd step, is really valuable to you, then you're talking to the right place. Now, in all fairness, and I think this is important for our audience to understand, if that step, Mr. or Miss customer, is not that important, we're probably not a good fit. Because we're not going to be that special to you. Because we have to realize, everybody, we're not going to create a brand that appeals to every single customer out there. In fact, we don't want that. We want to have something where it's got enough of a, personality and uniqueness that somebody's going to say, wait a minute, I love that. I love that. That's what we got to do. We got to do that. And then, as you said in the intro, Tom, one thing that's big in this is then all of a sudden you're not getting into fist fights over your pricing. Clients aren't beating you up and say, well, I can go down the street for 5% less. It's like, well, you can go down the street, but you're not getting what we sell.
You brought up some very important points. I'm going to address a couple of them. First of all, I noticed that the very first customer that you mentioned was Harley Davidson, which is a very unique, a completely unique brand product. You either love it or you're like, those are those obnoxious people who take up all 5 lanes on a Sunday morning, right? That's how you think of it, right? Or they they know something about Sturgis, but that's all they know about Harley Davidson. And the sound I think the uniqueness to Harley Davidson, frankly, it's the sound.
Yes,
That's
right.
what it is. It's like somebody the other day was saying to me, we went to dinner with them and they said, geez, Tom, you really like BMW, don't you? And I said, because they know they've only ever seen me in a BMW. I said, yeah. I said, I like the handling and the sound that
Right.
comes from a BMW. And if you don't like a car that handles really well, a BMW is probably not a good car for you because that's their uniqueness. You know, there's a
Right.
reason they call it the ultimate driving machine. So it's just, and I'm a great ambassador for a BMW because I love the way it handles. So it sounds to me like, you know, the naming, first of all, um, let's talk about the naming, and then how does the naming need to apply or integrate what you do? Because it can't be generic. For example, my book's tax-free wealth. Well, you can't trademark tax-free wealth. Everybody can say, well, I do tax-free wealth, okay, all day long. But you can, you know, if you came up with the naming of it so that it was unique, Wealthability would be one of those names that was unique. Um, how do you do that naming process when you're consulting?
Well, when we do naming processes, we conduct what we call a jam session. And a jam session is we work together, my team gets together in a very collaborative environment, and we will create literally 150 ideas for names within, let's say, an hour. Okay. And some of them are horrible. Some of them are pretty interesting. Some are kind of, yeah, no big deal. And we push and push and push. And what we do is we go through many, many rounds so that it is not uncommon for us to go through 500 to 1,000 potential names before we pick one. We just started working with a company a year ago, tremendous company out of Phoenix, Arizona, and they are a pipe, valve, and fitting company. And you may go, okay, boy, Barry, you're giving us a boring story. But you know what? There are no boring businesses, at least not to me. I think pipe, valve, and fitting, I think that's kind of interesting. Okay. I mean, you know, wealth, insurance, et cetera. I mean, it just depends. Some people find things boring, right? I don't find these things boring. So here's what we did is we went through name after name after name with this company. And they said, you know, we want something that's, you know, connected to our industry. Well, what we did is we got deeper and deeper and deeper into this. And one of our creative people said, Venturi. And I said, what? Venturi. And I go, okay, what's Venturi? He said, well, there's an effect called the Venturi effect that has to do with water propulsion that is involved with pipes and valves and fittings. And what if we named the company Venturi? And we went, oh my gosh. Well, the client said, that's amazing because it's something that has to do with their industry. Nobody's ever used that term for a company. So we wanted something unique. Now, I'm going to go back to one of your loves, which is BMW. And I'm going to go back to what we talked about. Let's not confuse superiority with differentiation. BMW is the ultimate driving machine. I've had the honor to work with them on some launches of their products. And I've had the honor to sit in boardrooms with some of their wonderful leaders who love their product. And I'm telling you this right now, Tom, several of them, a number of different times said, you know, I love the way our cars handle and perform, but you know, we could improve the interior styling a little bit. We could upgrade that because we've got this competitor or that one that's doing a little better. So we need to look at what we're doing and improve. I've sat in meetings with Harley Davidson where they said, look, yes, we have a great, great brand, a great sound, the sound of that Harley Thunder. Okay. But they've said, you know what? We have competitors that might be right now a little better in this area or that, and we need to improve. But what they both did, both brands did, is they didn't change their personality and turn into something they're not. BMW didn't say, you know what? We got guys like Tom. We're going to take him for granted. Don't worry about the performance anymore. He's going to buy no matter what. You know what we're going to do? We're going to turn into a very cheap, value-oriented car that everybody can buy. Well, you know what? They lose Tom, right? They're losing you. And what they want is they want more people like you who are willing to pay the money to get that incredibly great product. So again, I go back to that situation where we have to realize it runs deep. The differentiation we have runs deep. And I'll share a couple of other things because candidly, the name of what you call it is not nearly as important as what you identify as the uniqueness. So I'm going to share a couple things that are important. How do you determine what makes you unique? Is a great thing that we've had to uncover. So if you're a small company and you're saying, look, I cannot afford to hire a guy like Barry and his guys because, I can't afford those people coming into my place. Here's what you do. Talk to your customers, and I'm going to give a secret away. There's a secret going on here, and I'll tell you the secret. Talk to your customers, talk to your employees, talk to your leadership, and ask them a number of questions about what makes what you do unique, but ask this question. What should Tom, so let's say I was working for your company, Tom and his company, okay. What should Tom and his team never change? What do you want them to never, ever change? And there will be dead silence, and then they'll say something. So for instance, if we were talking to the loyal owners of BMW, if we said, what do you want BMW never to change? Tom, what would be your answer?
For me, handling.
There you go. All
Handling.
right. So you know what? That's one of your differentiators. That's why it is the ultimate driving machine. We have to determine what it is that we should not change. That may sound negative. It's not. It's purely positive. Because here's the danger. You have a bunch of entrepreneurs listening and watching your show. Well, entrepreneurs like you and me and some of these other crazy people, we're willing to change anything.
Yep.
Right? Hey, Tom, you got to change this, change that. Okay, I'll change it. Let's go. Okay, hold on. It's more important. What do you not change? So entrepreneurs listening, whether you have a large company or small, what is it that your customers, your people would say to you that you should never, ever change? And you better listen to that, and you better respect and honor it, because there's something good in there. There's gold in that answer. Somewhere there's something that's really valuable, and you got to hold on to it. Because again, if you don't, you commoditize and then forget it. You threw away the thing you used to do so well. And you know what? Now you're like everyone else.
I love it. That's so I love the naming. I love, it's the uniqueness. What is, and I love the idea that look at your steps, and here's the things we do, and here's the one thing that makes us different from everybody else. So what happens is you call it commodity creep, which I think is a great way to put it. Sometimes that commodity creep can seem like it's overnight, because you're doing really, 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 really well. Everything's going great, and then all of a sudden, whoa, wait, our sales dropped 50%. I mean, I've seen this happen. Our sales dropped 50%, and it's like it happened overnight. Clearly didn't happen overnight, but it did in the numbers happen overnight. So my question for you, Barry, is how do you see it? I mean, if it's not happening in your numbers, how do you identify this commodity creep that it's going on?
Well, I'll give you an example. I worked with an Amish RV company. Now that sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? It sounds like a joke. I'm about to. I worked with this Amish RV company. Okay, but I did, and they were great people. And what they did was they produced a wonderful product, and it was very bespoke or unique, or however you want to call it. But basically, there were hardly ever any two of those RVs that were alike, because one person wants a couch over here, the other one wants, a lazy boy over there, and somebody wants two sinks, and it's like, oh my God. But they could do it. Well, what happened one day is their management said, you know what? We have larger competitors that are selling things cheaper than us, selling products cheaper. They're easier to sell. And you know what? We need to fight that. So let's get rid of all of our customization. Let's only build like 3 versions of everything we have. We'll be able to lower price a little bit. Our dealers will love it because it'll be simpler. Our manufacturing plant will jump up and down because they don't have to change the line every 15 minutes to do something unique. So they did. And profit went sky high for 3 or 4 months, and sales then crashed. All of a sudden, they became like everyone else, only they were not really well equipped to be a generic product like the big guys were, the bigger competitors who were used to buying in bulk and being able to sell in bulk. All those things, they were not used to it. So what happened to them was they didn't find out very quickly, but as soon as they started to see a few things happen, and one was morale started to slip a little bit because they were hearing their people go, you know what, we're not that special anymore. We're faded glory. You know, it's like there's nothing that special. So they started to hear that. They started to see sales dip, and they felt it was a feeling at first. And then, of course, the numbers betrayed all their ideas, and it was very obvious, it was exposed. But what then happened was they realized, you know what, if we don't change, we're going to be in terrible shape. Now, what they did well is, you know, today's common word is pivot. What they did is they pivoted. They immediately did an about face. And then here's something else they did that was great. They owned up to it. They didn't rationalize it. They didn't throw a spin. What they did was they got up in front of their employees. They got a hold of all the people that were selling the product. They reached out to their customers and said, you know what? We made a mistake. We're going back to what made us who we are. We apologize, and you will now have us at our best. And that's what they did. So how do you correct this before you go down? I think as leaders, you're watching things. Is morale up? Are we feeling more proud of what we're doing? Are we less proud of what we're doing? I'll give you another example. I walked into a factory once, an ambulance factory, and they were building 5 different brands, and one brand was their flagship top brand. And he said, I want to show you our very best product. I want to show you what we're capable of. Now, we have the cheaper ones here too, but I want to show you. Well, they were building that great product on the same line, but with the same people and the same products as they were their very lowest cost product. So we're in the middle of getting a tour of that product, and the guy stops and he uttered an expletive that I cannot repeat. And he said, I'm not in the flagship product. I'm actually in our lowest price unit. They all look so much alike. I apologize. Let's go find that flagship product. And we stopped and we said, hold on, that's the problem. You are now confusing your top product with your bottom product. Why would your customers feel any different?
I love that. Let's kind of, you mentioned pricing. So
Yes.
of course the challenge is when you get a lot of competitors, it's a race to the bottom, right? I mean, it's just how fast can we get there? And we've seen that in our industry. We have a curious thing going on in our industry, and we have for some years with the CPA industry, is that CPAs as a group have tended to give away the valuable services, the consulting, and then they sell the non-valuable services, the tax return, right?
I live it.
But what we've seen is that because that's the way they think, even competitors coming in that are promoting advisory services are promoting them at a discounted price. And so they're doing more and more for the client at a lower and lower price, just so that the CPAs can get the tax return, because that's the annual renewal and that's the easy money, right?
It is. Yeah.
So when you look at pricing, and so pricing does actually at that point become an issue. I mean, it does really become an issue. I mean, you know, even BMW feels pricing pressure from time to time. Are there things you can do in your pricing as an example, installment payments, things like that. Are there things you can do in the pricing which doesn't change the value proposition and doesn't really lower the price, but makes it easier for people to buy?
You can do a number of things. I do want to talk to you. One of my favorite friends and I guess supplier partners is my CPA firm. They're called Baden, Gage, and Schrader. They're out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. They're a great firm. And they have helped me in an advisory position many, many times. So we just recently did their brand re-engineering, which is our process. Nice. So we worked with them on it. And one of their great opportunities is their advisory services in specific areas. So it's not the generic, hey, we're advisors, but there is probably nobody in our area that has been involved with more mergers, acquisitions, succession plans than the leader or two at that company. And so one thing we're advising them to do is focus on those specific advisory talents and services. Don't just go generic overall, say, hey, we advise. Okay, get into the specific areas or industries or situations and do that. So that's one thing. One thing you can also do in the pricing, you're right, as far as terms, you can stretch the terms. You can also ask for a longer term agreement. So it might be if we're at this certain level every month, it's an 18-month agreement, blah, 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 that kind of thing. You can do that. I think the secret is more in explaining your approach to how you handle this. Also, and we haven't talked much about this, but for CPA firms, I think this is huge. What is the experience working with you? What are you delivering? So the experience at my firm that I talked to you about here, and they're fantastic, and they'd be great to be on with you. They're great people. The experience there is, if anything, they are adverse to selling. They want to take care of you. They want to make sure everything goes well, okay? And in fact, when we were talking to them, they even said, hey, you know, the lowest thing on our priority list is growth. We want to make sure we take care of the client. And I said, but you got to understand, I am a client of yours, and I didn't come to you to get basic services because the problem is I can get those basic services cheaper. Right. And I can get them by companies that work with individuals across the world, you know, offshore. So I need somebody that understands my situation. So one other thing I think you could also look at, if I can talk to the CPA approach, is look at those individuals that you work with. Let's say you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of non-public businesses, let's say. Well, they're very, very personal with their business. Yep. You can bring that group together. You can bring a group of them together and talk about certain topics, positioning yourself as an expert. You can be a sort of a networker for them, connecting them with each other on certain things. There are ways that you all of a sudden become so important that to get rid of you, it's painful. It's terribly painful. Now, throw one more curve at you that has to do with the service industry, and it's related to yours, and that's the legal industry. So if you look at the law firms, it's very similar to what you're dealing with very CPAs. Similar. Yep. Yeah, it's incredibly similar. So here's one thing.
And they have a tougher time because they don't talk to their clients very often.
Right. Well, here's one thing that we learned, and that is we work with a very excellent law firm, and they're an older firm in our area. They're expensive. They're not the cool kids. You know, they're the law firms. There are some cool kid law firms. Yep. They're not the cool kids. And so they came to us, and what happened was we were talking to their customers, we were talking to their people. And again, we were doing what we call our brand re-engineering, where we're trying to learn the difference. What makes you unique? We call that portion of it a technical immersion, because we get immersed in what you do technically. We get deep into it. And one or two of the people we talked to said, well, you know, the bandwidth at the law firm's really good. Their bandwidth, blah, blah, blah. And going through it, all of a sudden it occurred to us, we thought, you know, they have a wide bandwidth. So many of the cool kid law firms were not as prolific as them, did not have as many specialties. And yet this company had a wide range. And if you were in, let's say, my position and they were my law firm, which they are, I could go to them for employment law, real estate law, trademark law, just go on and on and on, right? Or my other option would be I could go to one of the cool kid law firms that focuses on employment, another one that focuses on collections, another one focuses on two or three things. And all of a sudden you thought, one of their differentiations is their bandwidth.
Right.
You go to them for bandwidth. And yeah, you're going to pay a little more. And you know what? Their offices are a little stodgy compared to some of the newer ones down the street. But look what you're getting if you value bandwidth. Now, if you're a bargain shopper, Tom, you're not going to go with them because you can go to 5 different law firms and save $30 to $80 an hour. But you know what? For me, I'm not a bargain shopper. I don't have time to go do that. And I want someone I can trust. So all of a sudden, that's worth something.
Thank you. So one of the things you talk about is systems, right? That differentiate and using systems. One of the challenges, of course, is as a smaller firm or smaller company grows, is actually maintaining the quality control, actually having that system in there so that you can expand to more customers. Would you talk about that just for a few minutes? And because I think that's an important piece of this, when people are thinking, well, I'm in this blue ocean, let's say, your CPA firm, growth is not that important. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, to me, that's the easiest business in the world to run. I mean, I can run that business all day long because I'm not worried about growth. It's the growth that actually causes the challenges. So, how do entrepreneurs deal with that piece so that they can have more capacity and they can serve more people?
Well, one of the reasons that we're okay with not growing in these situations is that, and I don't want to get anybody angry at me, but it's that it's easy. I can just say, yes, Mr. Wheelwright. Oh, sure, Mr. Wheelwright. Yes, I'll do that, sir. Okay, great. I get off the phone. I go, boy, that was easy. You know what's hard? What's hard is to say, you know what, Tom, I'm not sure that's what's best for you. It's your decision. You are my client. We love you guys, but I'd like to talk to you a little more in depth and recommend this, this, and that, which I think is going to be better for you. Now, I'm just being honest with you, Tom. That's a lot harder than to say, sure. Yes, sure, Mr. Wheelwright. The problem is at some point, you're going to lose clients. You're going to lose opportunities. And the meaningful relationships, and I'll give you one insight, the meaningful relationships are where in a CPA firm, as an example, you're going to really benefit in the client category. And here's the thing you got to realize. You have to, again, if we just talk in your specific field alone, we have to identify, I'd bring everybody together at the company and say, okay, why do our clients work with us? And I think many of them would say, well, we're really nice people. We have great personalities. They really think we're good. One of them thinks we're funny. I follow up and I make sure I don't make a lot of mistakes. I'm very accurate and all that. But if you then divulged what you learned from your clients as to why, they might be surprised. And we did that with our good friends at Baden. And we shared with them what their clients were saying over the phone calls that we've had and the interviews we've had with their clients. And the clients were shockingly positive, but they were saying, I'm there because I trust so-and-so because he helped me on such and such. I wish, if anything, they would give me more of that. Another customer said, look, I give them my domestic business. I could be giving them my international business. I could be giving them more. They never ask. And I've looked at other companies from time to time, and so far I've stayed with them. So to me as an entrepreneur, I'm going, oh my gosh, we dodged that bullet, but how do we dodge more bullets like that? And instead, why don't we look at how do we realize what we really are about in the eyes of the customer. So I think you got to go to the customer and learn those things. I doubt many of the folks out there who feel that their customers love them would expect that their customers actually want a little more. They would like not just more time, not just more smiles. They'd like more input. They'd like more guidance.
No, I love that. My question really comes down to, how do you build the system to that will actually make sure that happens?
Well, I don't know if you build the system to make it happen. I think it's in your heart and it's in your soul to go learn what you're about. And then whatever that turns into could be your system. But I don't think the system comes first. I think you got to look at, this is my opinion, but you got to look at, okay, what are we about? And I'm serious. What are we about? And I guarantee, because I can tell you at my company, we're a service business. If you ask my people what we are about, it's not exactly what our clients think, but I'd like to think it's fairly close, and the closer those are together, the more likely you're successful. Then you build, to me, the systems and the infrastructure under it to make sure it happens. So again, here's one thing with the system, not to belabor it, but one thing: if your customers are really looking for input and advice to help grow their business and to get guidance, do you build into your system quarterly planning meetings with your customers? Now, if your customers don't give a darn about that, then don't build that in. But once you learn that, maybe you build that into your system.
Makes sense. So if you, Barry, this has been terrific. If you could, 2 or 3 steps that you think entrepreneurs should take to make sure that they're not getting lulled into commodity creep. They're not being lulled into their names, naming generic names fine, but actually where they can actually continue to make that differentiation part of their process.
I believe a few things that are really important, and I have not stressed it a ton in this discussion, but I usually do. And that is, it is very, very important in small and large businesses to rally your people around what makes you unique and what role they play, so that the person in the accounting department or the person in the whatever department doesn't feel like, look, I don't matter. Only these 2 people matter here. So one thing that's very important is you determine what makes you unique. You determine why those clients or customers come to you, and you bring your team together. You rally them around it and say, look, this is what we do. And you know what, Sarah, this is why you're so important. You do such and such. And you know what, Molly, you do such and such. This is why it's so important. And Danny, you're doing such and such. This is what you're doing that's so important. So you rally your people around that, because in your business, my business, and many businesses, your people are the face and the heart of your brand. So that's a major thing to do. A couple of other things we shared: don't follow the average company that's out there, because 16 out of 17 businesses go out of business in their first 10 years. So you're going to be competing with a lot of companies that are going out of business. All right. So that's another thing. And I think, as you mentioned, it's very, very important not to become a commodity. Don't look in the mirror and say, I want to look like somebody else, and then, basically do a business version of a facelift, only to wish you could undo it. Think about those actors and actresses where you see them and you go, oh my gosh, why did she do that? And the point is, we cannot undo it in our business sometimes. So learn to love that little mole or that birthmark that you have in your business, because it makes you a little distinct. So those are the things I would share.
I love it. The book is The Power of Differentiation: Win Hearts, Minds, and Market Share. Our guest has been Barry Labov at www.labov.com. You've been listening, watching the Wealthability Show. And please, for more information about Wealthability, go to wealthability.com and read Tax-Free Wealth. And when you do that, the great thing about differentiation, I love this conversation, Barry. The great thing about differentiation is when you get it right, and I can absolutely be a testimonial for this, you're going to make way more money, and pay way less tax. We'll see y'all next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.